We can get started.
Okay. So is everybody's video on? Who wants to be on? Pete?
Yep, my video's on.
It is? Huh. Interesting.
Can anybody else see the ugly face?
I can see you.
I see your face.
I can see you.
Not an ugly face.
All right. You guys should talk to my teenagers.
The
Okay,
face,
well,
but it's not ugly.
I'm gonna Pete, be kind to yourself there. Okay, y'all. Before we start, I just wanted to give you a quick update. I don't know if you heard about Cindy, but her husband did pass away Sunday, this weekend. So if you could just keep them in your, Cindy and her family and friends and your thoughts and prayers, I know she'd appreciate it. And even if you want to send her a little email, I know she'd appreciate it. So, welcome everybody. It looks like we have Janice, Brandon, Ceci. Oh, hello, Patrick. And Liz and Pete and Mimi on the channel right now. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Lauren, thank you for doing this great agenda once again and pulling the packet together. I quickly wanted to review, if you all have the email from Tuesday that Lauren sent that kind of outlines where we've been and where we are now. It says it's basically the one with the agenda. But I just wanted to review quickly that. Yep, there we go. Review that we did vote. The mayor's charge to us to review again was to, number one, figure out should the mayor and city council have new or move from 2 years to 4 years, and you know, what are the length of terms going to be, and as well as the method of implementation. The committee made the decision that they suggested 4-year terms, which would pass 8-3. And the committee also wanted to vote on term limits, which we currently don't have, but they suggested 10-1. We voted, it passed for 2 term limits contingent on 4-year terms. Then the other question that came up is, should we move from partisan elections to nonpartisan, and that passed 6-5. As far as staggered terms, that passed with and staggered terms contingent upon 4-year terms, that passed 10-1. Mimi was not with us; she was not feeling well that day, and she voted no. Mimi, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or just kind of stick with your no. If you do, speak up.
It's always hard when you don't hear the discussion because there could be points brought out that you hadn't considered, but to me it just seemed like extra elections weren't that necessary. And what we have right now, I don't see if there's a problem with. The whole city council is done in a single election, and that's fine with me. So that's why I voted that way.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. Okay, so also Liz and Kristen, I don't know if Kristen's on, doesn't look like it, but they also weren't able to be present, but they voted as well via email. Liz, I don't know if you want to say anything about your vote. You voted yes for staggered terms, but if you do want to say something, please speak up now.
No, I was reviewing everything, and I think it's okay. Staggered terms again. No, I did yes, right? For staggered terms, yes.
Okay, great. Then we are sticking with that 10-1. Doesn't look like Kristen's on the call right now, but she just straight up said, I'm from staggered. So that's a yes. So moving along, should Charlotte, on our next charge, should Charlotte Mayor and City Council have an increase in compensation? That passed 11-1. 3 people weren't present on the call, but they did vote via email, and that was Kristen Connor, Mimi Davis, and Christy Long. So they all voted in favor of the Mayor and City Council getting an increase in compensation. And should the Mayor and City Council salaries match Mecklenburg County Board of County Commission compensation? And that passed 11-0. I passed. Everybody voted. It was unanimous. And again, Kristen Connor, Mimi Davis, and Christy Long were not present at the meetings, and they voted yes via email. Mimi, do you want to say anything about that?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Great. Okay, so moving along, as Lauren said, these straw votes we can use as we figure out our package that we're going to deliver to City Council, our package of suggestions that we will deliver to them. And we can review it at, towards the end of, well, maybe next week, to make sure we're all convinced that this is what we want to deliver to council. So moving along, basically now we need to figure out updated policy guidelines and principles for the City Council redistricting resulting from the results of the 2020 census. So Lauren pulled together this packet. Lauren, I guess the team pulled together a nice packet that you may have had a chance to look through, but I thought, Lauren, this might be a good time for you to start chatting about that. Or actually, you wanted to talk about the public input survey first, correct?
Yeah, but we can move from the survey to the district criteria. First off, I just wanted to thank Alicia Osborne for being here tonight. She works with our planning, design, and development department. She's the division manager for long range strategic planning, and she has over 15 years of planning experience. And she's the lead on the 2040 comprehensive plan that the city is undertaking right now. And we thought she graciously agreed in a very short time frame, so thank you, Alicia. And we thought she could just provide great context for you guys as you all discuss district criteria and you look at growth trends in the city, redistricting, and just what's happened over the past decade in the city and the region. And so I'll turn it over to Alicia, but really quickly, I wanted to comment on the survey. We've gotten some great response. We've gotten over 600 participants and 130 individual comments. And we're closing the survey tomorrow afternoon, and we'll pull that data for you all over the next week. So thank you, Alicia.
Thanks, Lauren. So when do you think by our next meeting we'll have the data synthesized?
Hopefully, it's going to be a lot. Like I've tried generating the data and it's taking over an hour to generate. So I'm hoping over the next week, we'll be able to formulate something to provide to you guys to look over. So hopefully by the end of next week.
Great.
Lauren, I have a question. Did you send that to entities? I did send it to the trustees of CPCC and the trustees of the World First Council. Any other organizations that you send them to?
We sent them to, so we have a listserv of neighborhood organization leaders, and we sent them to them. There are over 100 people on that listserv, and we also sent it out to the city's boards and commissions. So anyone on that notify page received notification of the survey, and it's been pushed out on the city's social media channels as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so Lauren, do you want to have Alicia speak now? Or Alicia, would you like to speak? I know you had some slides you wanted to share on the growth in the district.
I do, and thank you all. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Waiting on to get control of the slides. There we go. So thanks again for just the opportunity to share some quick information about how Charlotte's growing. Just kind of a show of hands. Who's originally from Charlotte? Nobody? Few people?
I am Alicia.
Is that Miss Mimi? Who said that?
It's Nada.
You're the only one. So we're all the reason that we're now the 15th largest city in the country. Well, I moved here in 2004, and it's just a great city to live in. And I'm sure you guys fell in love too when you first moved here and hadn't left. And so, as Lauren mentioned, I'm the project manager for the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which is to help guide growth and development and public investments for the city of Charlotte over the next 20 years. So one of the key components of that process is really looking at a deeper dive into our past growth patterns, a lot of inequities in our communities, the disparities, just really diving into the numbers to see how we've grown in the past to be more intentional about creating complete and equitable communities and moving forward. So the past 2 years, this slide that you guys are looking at is kind of our back pocket slide. We keep it, and it really gives a snapshot of the diversity of our community in terms of our workforce, in terms of how we're building and how fast we're building, the types of building that's happening in our community, our tree canopy, our miles of creeks and streams and sidewalks, all the things that make Charlotte really great. But at the bottom part of this slide is the slide I like the most. It talks about the people, because I think, and you guys probably agree, that people make place. And so we're a pretty diverse community, well educated, median age, or young, growing, and upcoming community, but definitely a changing community for sure. So as I mentioned, Charlotte is currently the 15th largest city in the country in comparison to like San Francisco and some cities in Texas, just really large community. And so our estimated population is almost 900,000, which has grown, it's tripled since 1980. Just imagine that is a lot of people that have grown into the community. It includes most of us. Absolutely, kind of contributing to those large numbers. So that's a good thing. So don't feel bad about that at all. But we're not just growing in population, we're also growing in land mass. Our incorporated parts of Charlotte are 310 square miles. So this map is different colors, but the lighter shade shows where we were in 1980. And then the darker green is the areas we've grown in 1990 and then 2000, and then 2010 and 2020. So as you can see, we've grown a lot as a community, and we continue to grow, So this slide pretty much shows kind of the breakdown of the population, how dense we are as a community, almost 3,000 people per square mile, how diverse we are, and also some numbers around home ownership as well. So I mentioned before the work with the comprehensive plan and really looking at how our past patterns, growth patterns, and have contributed to a lot of disparities and inequity that we have in our community. And I'm sure you've seen a map called the crescent and the wedge. And this is a breakdown of that map to really show how, as we've grown to be a more segregated community, but also shows household income, and the average in the arc versus the wedge. And the wedge is typically this part of the city that's the southern part of town. But this slide gives us a really good picture of where we have to grow and grow really smart in order to address some of the inequities in our community. So this slide also supports some of that information in terms of homes with proximity to financial services. As you know, as Charlotte has grown, access to essential goods and services is one of our key challenges. Full service grocery stores, there are large parts of our community that don't have access to full service grocery store. And then these numbers just kind of show where the jobs are and how they differ per acre in different parts of the community. So to speak more to the charge that this group has of some of the work that you've been doing, it's about the city council redistricting process. I won't go a whole lot in detail about that whole process. I'll just give kind of the purpose. And, you know, there's 7 districts, 4 at large, 11 in total. And the whole point of the redistricting process is to make sure that there's an equal number of residents. And we talked about growth leading up to this slide because we know that there are more people in these districts than the last census, and we're continuing to grow. There's definitely a lot of differences in our residential growth, and we'll see those numbers in our 2020 census numbers that will come out next year. This slide shows some of those numbers, and I'm not sure if you can read it well, but these are the additional residential units that have been added since 2010, between 2010 and 2018. If you look at the brown, that's Councilmember Watlington's area, which is additional 13,000. And then you look at some of how that compares to some of the other districts in the districts that have grown throughout the city. It's a lot of growth. And so the census is really, really important in trying to capture who do we have, because at the end of the day, those numbers not only tell us about population and growth and how we can govern, but how we spend capital dollars, how federal money gets allocated to our community. So it's really important to make sure that as we talk about being really smart about representation and governing these districts, that we know that there's a really important part of how we invest in our community too that's tied to that census, those census numbers. So a report came out today, or came to me via email, that kind of gives the snapshot of where North Carolina is in terms of the census. So right now our response rate is about 62% in comparison to the national response of 66%. So we're falling a little bit behind that trend. Mecklenburg County is doing pretty well. Historically, this is kind of where we are with the census, is around 66% participation. North Carolina is 13th in terms of, no, not North Carolina, Mecklenburg County is 13th out of the whole state. The first is Union, the city of Union, North Carolina, that has 74% participation. So it's really important that we participate and we encourage our friends and family to participate in the process. I know it's a little hard because we have people going door to door, and someone knocked on my door. I just talked to her through my ring. It's still a pandemic outside, but she was nice about it and made sure that I was counted and that my neighbors were counted as well. And so the deadline's been extended to October 5th. It was originally yesterday. And so they've extended it a few more days to make sure that we get counted. So that's really important to your work and to our community as a whole. And I'd be remiss if I didn't do a shameless plug for the comprehensive plan. And that also is a very important process. And I encourage each of you, I know Miss Mimi's really involved in the process and some others are involved, but I encourage you to also get involved in shaping how we grow in the future and making sure that investments are allocated to the places that need it. And city council plays a really big role in adopting these types of policy documents and making sure that things really happen. And so with that, I will take any question that concludes my presentation.
Alicia, this is Janice. Very nice presentation. So is the comprehensive plan process taking place right now?
Yes, ma'am. It started in 2018, and we are, it's a five-phase process. We're in phase 3, where we are developing the policies and strategies. We will have a draft document on October 31st that will be released to the public. We have a community event that we're hosting to make sure people can actually see and receive a draft document if they want to hear the highlights of the plan. And I'll make sure that each one of you all get an invitation to that, but you can still be involved. There's a 6-month review process, public review process, where you can talk about it, the plan, give us feedback within it, talk to your elected officials, your neighbors. So it's not too late to get involved.
Okay. And my other question is with the census, with the recently, I think the appellate court ruled that I know there was an attempt by the Trump administration to block the extension of the census count, and the appellate court ruled to extend it. Did they not extend it to the October 30th? Or is it just the 3rd?
Well, what I received today says the 5th.
The 5th?
Yeah, and I can check and make sure. Let me look at this document that they sent.
Yeah, I'm not sure today. I thought it was going to be extended for about another month.
Yeah, I heard that too, but the email I got said the 5th. I can double check and I'll make sure before I get off the call, I'll make sure I send it in the chat box.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I heard you guys were a really rowdy bunch. I know you have more questions.
I just wanted to say if the date is different, I was planning to send this out to Charlotte. So if you could get back to us, maybe put it on our list, so we all would know the date, then I go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
I missed most of the presentation. I typically do have questions. Most of the presentation, a little bit that I caught, it was really good, good information that you shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. I have a question. With the population increase, do you think there is a possibility of having additional districts in the city?
I thought that was y'all's charge.
Well, but still we can do the work, but
Listen, that's what I heard. You have the power to do that, not me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good question. Based on the information that Lauren sent, there's a lot of good data to compare where we are as a community, and then where other cities of similar size, their boards, their governing bodies, where they compare. I think that's some really good information to give you some guidance. But what we do know is the people are coming.
Right, for sure. I was interested in the age group too. Okay, so
Can I ask a favor? Just if it helps, do you mind putting that data up just so everybody's looking at the same set of numbers? Lauren, I know you shared it.
is Lauren still?
But I'm sorry, comparing Charlotte to other cities.
Yeah, we'll get that up. It's on,
Okay.
let me reach out to Wendy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can't do that, but I send that.
And one thing to take note is we're considering adding council members, whether they're at large or district. In North Carolina, the size of the governing board can be between 3 and 12 members, and that's for council. Patrick, I believe that's excluding the mayor, correct?
I looked at the information that you provided, Lauren, and thank you so much for that. Is it because we're getting a lot of feedback, or is it just me getting a lot of feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's someone, I don't know if there's a dog in the background or.
No, I mean feedback through the system. See, everybody is muted.
Yeah, and Janice, I can't hear you very well either. Can
you hear me at all?
Yeah, but it's a little, not as loud as usual. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've had some problems. If I talk a little louder, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I had to get my laptop had to go in for a little checkup last week, so I thought that may be the problem. But in looking at the data, Lauren, that you provided, so cities that were, I guess, close to our population and the ones that were larger, had more people than we do, had more districts than we do. And of course, and those are the national cities, national peer cities. North Carolina peer cities they're all so much smaller than ours. It's almost like we're having to kind of jump off this bridge. Charlotte's having to kind of jump off this bridge ourselves for a lot of these decisions. But looking at the comparisons, the cities that were close to ours, even though they were a little bit less population, but then those that were larger than ours, they had more districts.
Yeah, exactly. So the average number of representatives on our peer cities is 14. And typically with our peer cities, they have more district representation than at-large representation. In North Carolina, the only 2 cities without any at-large representatives are Winston-Salem and Fayetteville.
And Lauren, forgive me, I think this data is good, but was there data too that compared the number of residents in a district in Charlotte compared to our peer cities nationwide?
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to.
Page 10.
Yeah, if you go to the general info, let's see, district size.
It's page 10, I believe. I'm sorry. 9 out of 10.
While you guys are looking at that, this is Julie. Can I just ask you, when you say the average size is 14, are the councils actually even numbered? Because that's always the problem when it comes to a vote. You usually would want an uneven number of council members.
Yeah, no, they are not always even numbered. And if they are, then typically they have, they enable the mayor to solve a tie vote.
And we do too, but generally, that's a action we try not to have. So it's just one thing to keep in mind if you want an even or uneven number. Operationally, uneven is a little easier.
Oh, okay. As far as voting and so forth. So not having a tie, being able to not have a tie vote. Julie, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe Patrick has been other cities. Maybe he doesn't think that's a big deal, but.
Yeah, usually it is set up that way. Particularly, it really just depends on if the mayor is going to be a voting member or not. But usually, if the mayor is not going to be a voting member, then you would want an odd number of council members.
Okay. And Patrick is currently Mayor Lyles. Is she a breaking voting member?
Yeah, only in the case of a tie. Yes.
Only in the case of a tie. Okay. Otherwise, she doesn't vote at all.
Correct. She does have veto power, which she's never used. But to my knowledge, she's never used it.
Okay. But in terms of matters, she doesn't vote unless it's a tie. Is that
correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And Lauren, the document is the one you have on the Charlotte Tier City district size. Yeah, there you go.
Hey, Patrick, I do have a question, and you may answer that. And again, I apologize for being late today. With we're increasing the size of the districts or decreasing at large or increasing at large, does that have to come from the state, or is that already written in the law? We could do it if we really wanted to.
Those are part of the changes to your government structure that have already been delegated to the local government. So you could change that. That's one of those things where you could do it. You could do a referendum. You could try to do it, and the voters, if they get 5,000 signatures, could force a referendum. But that's part of that packet of governance that has already been delegated down to the local governments to be able to change on their own.
So Sam, that's the changes and how they go about that is on page 3 of the packet Lauren sent. But just to clarify, Patrick, for everybody, by state law, it's the city council can be 3 to 12 people max.
That's correct.
Right.
And I do want to make sure that everyone understands when you say city council, because a lot of people think, city council doesn't include the mayor, or and for state law purposes, the council members are everyone who isn't the mayor. So you could have a 13-member city council that has 12 council members and a mayor. That's what Durham used to be until 1999 or 2000, when they had a vote to reduce the size of their council. So you could end up with 13 elected members that I think the common language is that's your city council, which is 12 council members and 1 mayor.
Thank you.
So I think what would be interesting to consider, and I'd love to hear the committee's point of view on this, and Julie, your point of view as well. But if you look at this data up on the screen, Charlotte by far has more members, more representatives of each district, more citizens in each district than any other city, except for Dallas and San Diego. And if I did my research correctly, I also looked at the populations of the districts in the State House of Representatives, and those districts were smaller than Charlotte's. So I thought it was interesting that the district representatives on city council had so many more people in their district than state reps and their peer cities. But am I reading that data correctly? And I'd be curious, does that affect the ability to govern and represent those districts?
Yeah, Peter, one thing that I can see this very small data on my phone, but I know like Nashville has 42 council members because they merged their city and county government. And that's always kind of a bugaboo, is that people don't want to give up seats. And so they just say, well, we'll just have everybody. And I know that the council president there made a comment on a call I was on that he said, basically they don't even know each other, a lot of them. And I do think that the more a council can get to know each other, the better they function together. So 42 just feels sort of untenable. But that's why the Nashville number is so small. I think Dallas also has a merged government. I'm not positive about that. But that could be one reason. It's a holdover from a merged consolidated government.
Julie, what about Houston? Do you interact with what is going on there? Because that's huge.
I don't know. I can find out from National League of Cities, though. That's gigantic. Now, one thing I would say is my district colleagues, and I can tell you from at large, I hear from some districts, I don't hear anything from other districts. And that's one thing that I've always said to my colleagues who are district reps who feel like, I don't spend that much time. Well, they might live in a district that's doing just fine, thank you. And, whereas I remember Al Austin over District 2, which is Malcolm Graham's district, saying he would get calls at all hours of the night from about gunshots in the district. So different districts have different demands. And I would say that it wouldn't, if you said, okay, everybody gets the same number of constituents, it doesn't equal the same workload.
Okay.
I think that's a good point, Julie.
Yeah. So, as a whole, though, people could work that's a little tricky. I mean, we'd have to look at a ton of data to figure out who's working harder, and I don't know how we would do that based on the calls.
That would be a can of worms. I would say that you would want to look at what districts have grown the most, maybe even which districts have had the most rezonings, because that's probably what we get the most phone calls about. So maybe even look at crime statistics and rezoning statistics, and there could be a correlation between 911 calls, but certainly District 3, which is Steel Creek, is one of them that we say we've got to give them some relief, because that's, that area has grown, and they keep saying we've added the equivalent of Asheville into that district. So, there would be one that we constantly have rezoning requests for. So I would, Lauren, you might want to weigh in, but I would think if you talk to the planning department and CMPD, they could tell you which districts they consider to be the busiest. And then maybe that helps to say, okay, well, maybe we give that council member a little bit less. Whereas, honestly, just in my opinion, I don't hear a lot from District 6 and 7, sort of South Park, Ballantyne. Most of what I hear is from, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. So that's where the most change, I think, has happened.
Julie, can you talk a little bit about your experience over the years at large in comparison to your fellow council people who are at district?
Well, we always sort of poke fun, half serious, half joking about who's busier, a district rep or an at-large rep. And the district reps get all of the rezoning calls. They get all the, I'm mad at my neighbor calls, that type of thing. Or, they stay super busy with neighborhood meetings, multiple meetings a night. And we don't have that, but we are expected to be at things in every district. So I really do think it evens out, because I might not get as many calls to be at a neighborhood meeting, but I get them times 7. So, I'm expected to appear in every district. So I don't have a great, I don't have a great way to compare that, honestly, but I do have a feel for where I go the most. And the most activity, the most neighborhood meetings, frankly, are in the neighborhoods that are experiencing the most change and have the most crime. I don't see a lot of neighborhood meetings that I'm invited to, at least, in certain parts of town.
So would that be, would that be District 3 you're talking about with its growth and?
Yeah, the Steel Creek area just has had tremendous growth. The airport, up by the airport, from a commercial standpoint, District 1 has changed a lot. And then I would say over the next, several years, District 5, with the transformation of Eastland, I think that's going to be, and Mimi can speak to that, there's a tremendous amount of activity out there, and it's going to be very transformational. So we'll probably see a lot there. University area has had with the Blue Line extension, has had a lot of growth. But again, I think if you, did a little analysis of growth trends, calls for service, and rezonings, you could get a pretty good feel for which districts require the most of a district member's time.
I think Mayor Pro Tem Isa just called out that map I showed in the exact order of highest growth, the top 3 districts with the highest growth. So the map showed District 3, Councilmember Watlington's district, had between 2010 and 2018, 13,000 units constructed. And I think that's possibly residential. The second was Councilmember Ingelson's district, 11,000 units. And then
what number is that, Alicia?
so it's District 1.
District 1. Okay.
And then District 2, kind of northwest of the university area, has 8,500 units. And that's in the presentation I just shared, but that's the exact order and how much growth we've seen in districts. But the rezoning would be a pretty good metric too.
I'm just curious. Do you have the numbers for the others in front of you, Alicia, that you can just throw those out there?
So District 4, 7,100. District 5, 2,500 roughly. 6, 5,500. And then 7, which is Councilmember Driggs, 5,800.
Thank you.
And I would think that, Alicia, with your information on the comprehensive plan, that would be really, I'm sure that the comp team has a lot of good information as well.
Yeah, we have two big documents that kind of show a snapshot in time of how much the area has grown, where, and who's there, who's living there. I think there's a link, and I'll send that out too, and make sure Lauren shares to the Charlotte Explorer. I think it was in your reading materials, but that has all metrics about crime calls, kind of first response calls in different areas. You can turn on different layers on that map and see the different data points. That would be really helpful for y'all's analysis too.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
For this purpose, do we have, for the purpose of the meeting today, do we have any way to access that information on the crime?
So I noticed in your package that Lauren sent, the links to those data sets are within that information that she gave you. There's 3 links. Let me see what page it's on to make it real easy for you to find it. Can't remember what page it's on.
Yeah, it's on page 6.
3 hyperlinks, and it's really easy to navigate. If you need hard copies of anything, we can definitely get that to you.
Yeah, those links that was very good information, Alicia. A question that I have, so this is Janice. So if we were to recommend and the council takes up, the redistricting, how are the, I guess this is like a computer program or something that will kind of divide up, say we decided, okay, we want to split up Steel Creek. Is there, how is it determined? Would we have to recommend where lines are drawn, or how will that take place? What's the process?
Patrick wants to talk about that part, but I know the technical side.
I'm just curious, and I don't need all the technical details, but I mean, will we need to recommend lines, how the lines to be drawn too, or how does that work?
So I can tell you, I've done this once back in 2010, and how it was done, and I'll have to get up with planning, but at some point in time you're going to get the response from the census as to what the population is in all the districts, because keep in mind, at the end of the day, you need to balance out the districts. They don't have to be exactly even. I think there's a sort of a 10% rule. I don't know if that's a rule of thumb or an actual state statute. I've always just assumed that it was a 10% rule where you take the population of your community, and if you're going to have 7 districts, you divide your population by 7, and then that's the number that you need to sort of stay within 10% of for each of your districts. And then what we did, and again, I'll talk with planning, but we had Durham had a program where you could flip a precinct. So if there was a precinct that was on the border of District 2 and District 3, and they would have had their population in the district, you could literally turn it off at District 2, stick it in District 3, and that would change the number on the map. And again, you're trying to get to, and that's where, some of the goals that you're going to need to come up with, will come into play in terms of, not splitting up neighborhoods. If that's important to you, that a distinct neighborhood is included in one district as opposed to splitting it up. You don't want to split up voting precincts, so you've got separation in that regard. There may be geographic boundaries that you don't want to split as well. But literally, and it was actually kind of a fascinating thing, the way that the computer programs were, at least in 2011. When I last did this, I mean, you could literally turn a precinct on and off and change the numbers, and you literally balanced it. But you had some overarching goals of things that you didn't want to do, and I can remember, and a lot of communities, I think, don't want to split up a community and water down that community's voice on their council, and that's something that you all will have to think about as you go forward. But that's how it was done. Alicia, I don't know if you were here back in 2011.
I was, but the person sitting next to me was the one doing the work, and it's they use our GIS program to do that. So that's why the 2020 census will be really, really important. Once we get those numbers back, they break it down by census block. I think they use census block information. And then they break it down by voter precincts, and they get those geographies from the Board of Elections. Then they use that information, and then they tie it to the precincts, and then you have a general idea of what percentage of the population is Democrats, Republicans, or unaffiliated. Like, that's a part of the consideration too, party affiliation, to make sure you have balanced representation on the council. I think that's one of the considerations. And then Patrick will work with council to draw the actual boundaries.
That's right.
But the population is, that's one of the key criteria, is kind of making sure that it's equitably distributed throughout the city. And then the precincts also plays a key role in that.
And I'm assuming that, that as far as the community responsibility, I'm assuming that we won't be involved in those intricate details. I'm assuming, or how involved would we need to be in, or our responsibility just to make the recommendation to split it up or not?
Yeah, I think what you're going to be focused on are the goals, the guidelines that council should use in the redistricting process is what you're going to be focused on.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just jump in? One thing I wanted to second was not splitting up neighborhoods in districts. CMS splits neighborhoods. We have school attendance areas that go right down the middle of neighborhoods, and trying to do adopt a school drives or PTA drives the way my organization does makes it very, very difficult. And we need to keep the neighborhoods in one district, in one neighborhood.
My last question, not to hog the conversation. First of all, are there guidelines already, or is this part of our work that we need to do, is come up with the guidelines that we want them to use?
I will, and Lauren, I don't know if we've, I don't know if Lauren's still on the call or not. I don't know that we provided you with the guidelines that were last used in 2010, but I will get those for you so that you'll have that in terms of what was used back then. And again, absent something unusual happening, like, and there have been times we don't really have that zoning authority anymore, but once upon a time, I know Fayetteville had to do it several years ago before the zoning laws changed, where they annexed a huge community and then immediately had to do some redistricting because of all the people that they brought in to a particular district that they have there. But keep in mind, this is just done for the most part every 10 years. And once you get that information from the census, it is almost exclusively GIS driven, but for the community group that sets the goals and those types of things. And again, I'm just throwing out things that I can recall that most communities focus on, which is that not splitting up neighborhoods. Don't split up precincts. The districts have to be contiguous, so you're not going to have, District 1 and then, another precinct and so, outside of the district that's not contiguous to the rest of it. And then that's when you start flipping the districts or the precincts to make them balance out.
Okay.
Yeah, to Patrick's point, I believe the mayor stated when she was on with us that past criteria had included, hey, we'll have 3 Republican districts, we'll have 3 heavily Democrat districts, and then we'll have 1 toss-up, and that there would be a 10%, no more than a 10% differential in population between each district.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, guys.
One question I had, Patrick, this is probably obvious, but if we said, okay, well, let's consider an at-large person, we would not have, there would, no changes really would be as far as redistricting goes.
Yeah, so long as you have district reps, you're going to have to look at the districts to make sure that they're equal. Even if you decided you wanted to add a 12th council member and that person was going to be at large, you've still got those 7 districts, and you'll still have to go through the exercise of reading the census information and looking at the balance that the census says, if a district is now imbalance because of the growth in the last 10 years. So you're still going to have to go through the process, even if you just decide either you stand pat or you add an at-large individual.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Patrick right now that on the legal side? Or Lauren?
Janice, I think you raised a good question about what were the guidelines in 2010, and I'd like to take a look at those. Lauren, I appreciate your feedback too, that it was designed to be politically balanced. I'd like to take just a look at those and wrap my head around that a little further, but I do think that somehow, whether it's in adding another district member, perhaps, that the citizens of each district, there shouldn't be that many more than not just other cities, but then the state house members. That it's just, in a fast-growing city, we may need another district member.
This is Liz, and you may have said this, and I apologize, my phone, my internet, everything went down. How many can you have? Is there like a limit on how many districts you're allowed to have in a city? Like a max, I don't know, 10, 12, or that's up to the discretion of the city?
Yeah, so you can have a maximum number of council members at 12. So I guess theoretically you could have 12 districts if you decided to get rid of all the at-large. And I think Lauren mentioned that Fayetteville is all district and Winston-Salem is all district in terms of their representation on the city council.
And last question, I'm sorry. Do you have an opinion for legally whether if everything is, instead of having at large, having exactly that, is there a legality to it to go one way or another? Or is it just how it was set up?
Yeah, it's really just how it was set up. Sometimes there's, a community may decide that a particular district needs more focused representation as opposed to, if you're all at large, you may focus on just a particular area and ignore other areas. So I think that was the gist of this idea of having a district rep, is you've got somebody that's more focused on on the district. And that can kind of play a couple of different ways as well. If they take their job as, I only care about my, 100,000 people, and the other 700,000 are not my problem because they don't vote for me. So you have to sort of balance that in terms of, and that's more of a political issue of the individual that ends up being the district rep. Some district reps see themselves as, an emphasis or the voice of this community, but they're also part of the larger community as well. And then others really just focused on, if it didn't happen in my district. And I'm not saying so much about this council, but generally speaking, that's where that political balance comes in, or that tension can come in, is, are you really representing or being a part of the larger city, or are you just strictly focused on your district?
Thanks, that really helps. I appreciate it.
That's a good question. I'd like to at least get a quick follow-up. I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem is still with us, but what is her thoughts, or what does she feel the council thoughts would be around eliminating one or maybe all three of the LR seats, and just doing all districts, or adding a couple more LR seats, including maybe one or two more districts? I don't know if she's still with us. If she is, I would love to hear her thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I think that, the thought is valid that I certainly get phone calls from people that say, well, I haven't heard back from my district yet. And that's, could be that district person is really busy. So people do feel like they have more than one representative with at-large. And I don't know if there's a need for 4 at-large. I haven't really gotten much information about that. So I think it's something certainly to talk about, how many at large you need. In 2010, when they looked at this, I think it was Warren Cooksey that brought up the notion of, when you have districts, and this is something that happens in some cities, everybody votes for that district representative. So even though you're running for a district, you're still being elected by all by the whole city, which is kind of interesting too. And then that makes...
Julie, how does that work? I'm sorry, I don't get it.
So right now, when you go and vote, you can vote for 4 at-large and 1 district representative.
Right.
In some cities, even the district representatives run citywide. So even though they're going to, let's say District 1, you're running to represent District 1, the whole city is going to vote on you and for you. And that means that you are going to have to listen to what's, constituents in other parts of town have to say. And so if you think of, I don't know, the Uptown Business District, for instance, other people may feel that they have the right to tell Larkin Eggleston how they feel about uptown development, even though, he doesn't represent somebody in 3, 4, 5, whatever. So it's interesting. I don't have a lot of opinion just because I haven't really looked at the issue, but I think it was, and Lauren, you might have these in your archives. I think it was Warren Cooksey who produced a body of work on that notion back when they were looking at this in 2010, the idea of a district rep still being voted on by the whole city.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Julie said, that is how Durham is set up. So the ward representatives, there are 3 ward representatives in Durham, but they're just required to live in those wards. That's it. The entire community will vote on them, and they are, the Ward 1 rep in Durham is only the Ward 1 rep because he or she lives in Ward 1, but the entire community votes for those reps.
I actually have an email from Warren here. Goes into this. Also, didn't I feel like Gaston is that way, Gaston County. Julie, do you know, or Patrick?
I don't know about Gaston County.
Okie doke.
It's just, when you've got a major development site like the River District on the west side, or you've got parts of town where the light rail is going to go, or the Eastland development. If it is transformative for the whole city, that might be one reason why constituents in other parts of the city are looking at who's going to represent that district. And that it's just something to think about. I don't really have an opinion on it because I don't know enough about it beyond that.
That means that the entire city council of those cities, every time there's an election, is campaigning citywide.
Right.
Which kind of thins out the channels of communication.
Yeah, me personally, I don't like that idea. I think those districts reps should represent their districts, and that they should be accountable to their districts. But I don't think people in District 6 should be voting for the people in District 1. I also think that's why we need at-large members, and I wouldn't be in favor of eliminating that position. I wonder though, Patrick, did I understand you correctly that in theory we could add 2 more districts, and we would have 9 districts, 4 at-large members, and then the mayor would break ties?
Yeah, so that my math has you up to 14 there. Is that correct?
Yes, but would the mayor count as a council member?
Yeah, so you have to, you can only go so far as 12 council members. So
Okay.
at large and the district cannot add to more than 12.
Okay, including the mayor.
Right.
Okay.
So
The mayor can be your 13th, but keep in mind, and we had talked about, usually if the mayor's not a voting member, then it's probably going to be incumbent upon you to have an odd number of council members, which is why you're probably at the maximum right now if the mayor's not going to vote, if that makes sense. So you've got 11 council members, they do all the voting, and you've got an odd number. If you're going to move up to 12 council members, and that's going to give you that even number, and if the mayor is not a voting member, you could end up with ties, assuming everybody's there. And I guess I suppose the mayor could then vote to break ties, but usually when you've got a non-voting mayor, it's when you've got an odd number of council members. But there are other communities that have a voting mayor and an odd number, and you've got like 7, and the mayor is one of the voting members.
Right. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'd be curious to hear everybody's opinion, including yours, Patrick. But if we added 1 more district member, that would give us a total of 12 council members, right? And then the mayor could break the ties if need be. And in the meantime, each district representative would represent fewer people. So they could be more, with these fast-growing areas, in a fast-growing city, every one of those districts that you mentioned have at least 5,500 units that they're adding just in the past 2 years, if I understood that correctly. I just think, and especially when you compare them to the peer cities nationwide, especially when you compare them to the size of the State House and the members there in Raleigh, it's not even close. And so I'd be curious to hear any things to consider. Again, just playing devil's advocate, why not add 1 more district member and keep the rest of it the same and have the mayor break ties?
Well, and Peter, and you could take away an at-large seat also to get another district. I don't know that having 3 or 4 at-large makes, my colleagues might feel differently, so I'm not speaking for everybody. We haven't really had the conversation, but I don't really see that 3 or 4 is going to matter that much.
Yeah, I think to Julia's point earlier, if a lot of the work is being done in the district side, the district for the ones getting calls and putting out the fires for the most part, I would be more inclined to take away a large seat and make that a district seat, since the work is being done at the district level anyway. If that's at all, Peter.
Julie, and
yeah,
maybe you can weigh in on this too. And I'm just putting this out there, say that we suggested or we agreed, oh gosh, we should move to eliminate all at large. What are your thoughts on that?
I think having at large is good in the sense that it does balance it out in the event that you get a council, I'm not saying it happens but in the event that you get a council member that just isn't cluing in, you know, you've always got at large. And certainly, again, I've seen times where the council member, district member is super busy. Maybe there's a, you know, big rezoning, whatever, and then they reach out to an at-large person, and you know, again, you've got a little bit more representation. So I do see it does balance things out, and that's why they were initially put in place. But I don't know that you need 4.
Yeah, and I'm not wed necessarily to keeping 4, but I would want to keep some for sure, some at large. I think it's good to have some elected officials who represent the entire city.
Sometimes, honestly, the 4 at large go to citywide events that the districts don't go to. So I go to a lot of stuff that are more civic. I don't know how to, I'm trying to think of a good example that maybe a district rep wouldn't go to. So it might be Center City Partners, might be, you know, some more infrastructural type things in nature events that, or the Alliance, that district members never go to. And I think that's important too. That's more, I do think of the at-large seats as being sort of at the 20,000 foot level, kind of overseeing the big picture, and that the districts are more, you know, down in the weeds on specific neighborhood issues. And I don't know what's more work, to be honest, but that's just the difference I notice.
Thanks. So you're saying that the at-large population, or the at-large members do add value, and it's important to consider.
Oh yeah, I mean I go to a lot of stuff that I don't see any district reps at. So it's just a different role. But you know, and then I won't go to as many neighborhood meetings as my colleagues do.
I'm with Peter. I I think I would like to see that we do keep some at-large members. I think it's an advantage to know. I feel good knowing that, okay, I have my district representative, but if I need something else as a second person that I can call them, I think this is an advantage. Sort of our options, and so basically we got to stay at 12. So and if we're going for an odd number, so one possibility is adding an extra district and decreasing down to 3 at large. And it sounds like I'm hearing that the greatest need, or a greater need, is in the Steel Creek area. Is that what I'm hearing?
Thanks, Janice. That is what the mayor had said initially, and I think Julie, you also, and Elisa also mentioned that.
Yeah, and I've heard Steel Creek is just growing tremendously.
And will continue to grow. I mean, planning could certainly give you where they see the growth patterns for the next 10 years. Because remember, this is you know, the census won't happen again for another 10 years. So
that would be great to see. I don't think that's in our packet, so that would be very helpful.
I'm sorry, is that River District going to be in the Steel Creek, Julie, or somebody? The new River District?
It's west of the airport. Now, whether it'll be that district is you know, the big question.
It'll be next to Steel Creek, basically, right?
Yeah, north of Steel Creek.
So I think no doubt there's that need in Steel Creek for more representation. But again, tell me if I understand correctly. Our task would not be to draw the lines or where the neighborhoods are or where the precincts are. Our job would be to set the guidelines, right? And in 2010, we believe that the guidelines were pretty even, you know, half Republican, half Democrat. And so I wonder, again, I'm curious to hear feedback and if there's anything I'm overlooking, but if we had one more district member, we'd have 8 districts, 4 at large, 1 mayor who could break ties if need be, and we could come up with the guidelines again that let's keep it 50-50 in terms of partisanship, and let's have it be no more than plus or minus 10%. But is there anything you think I'm overlooking with that approach? Is there any downside?
Patrick?
I think the only thing, and I don't, it sounds like the question was whether or not to have the council without the mayor being even versus being an odd number. Patrick, you mentioned that. But if the mayor is going to be a tiebreaker, is there a strong argument to having it uneven if the mayor is going to be a tiebreaker?
I apologize because I haven't looked into this. I don't know if it's critical to have the mayor be a non-voting member of the group. I've seen situations where the mayor does vote, but I don't know that that really matters. It's just that the likelihood of the mayor doing a lot more voting, I think, increases if you have an even number of council members. And a non-voting mayor just to break ties. But that's not, I don't know if that's really a legal issue. That's more of a political issue if you have that going. I think the downside is that in those tie situations, particularly if it's if you got to a tie, then you've got a split in the group, which means that it's probably a bit of a controversial or high profile matter where you can't get consensus among the council members, which means that the mayor now is the person who was always voting on the usually, I don't want to use controversial, but the tougher cases where you can't get a consensus among the council members, you're putting the mayor in that spot all the time. When it comes up. And that's the only thing that I can think of. But in a 13 member where they're all voting, 1 mayor, 12 council members, you're not going to have that. It's that person who pushed it over the edge or what have you. At least not as clear as, okay, it's 6-6, and then you turn to the mayor. It's like, hey, what's the answer going to be? 6 of us are going to be unhappy with you, and 6 of us are going to be really happy with you. And having that happen on multiple occasions again. And Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Mayor Lyles has had to put that has had to break a tie in her tenure.
That's right, Patrick. And I would say that would be a huge cultural shift that I would think that a lot of the council members would struggle with, because we are a body of 11. The mayor generally sets the agenda, and the council votes on it. So it would be very awkward to then say that the mayor is going to vote every time. It puts the role of the mayor in a very different place.
Thanks, Julie. Patrick, I wanted to circle back with Pete's question, just so we can get really clear on this. That should we make a decision that we add another council person, or we replace a district or an at-large rep with a district rep, an extra district rep, or the district rep. We are making decisions where we're suggesting you don't break up neighborhoods, you don't, you follow the guidelines that Vi talked about. But back what Pete was saying, we don't have to say this is how you're going to draw the district, correct? Or
yeah. That's correct, and we've back-ended this part of the conversation because so much of it is dependent upon the census results. And once you get those, I think then you can sort of take a look at where the discrepancies are, and that may help you in terms of deciding what are the important things. And there may be some things that it doesn't matter what the numbers look like. You don't want to break up neighborhoods. You can't break up precincts. And if those are important, you can put those out there. But there may be other things that you see, depending on where you see the growth in the city and how out of balance, assuming a district or two will be out of balance from the other districts, and how to rectify that may guide you in terms of what you want to put out there for guidance for council or recommended guidance for council.
I offer one other suggestion as well, just to think about. And I'm sorry about the background noise. A lot of cities our size, and honestly, they are the ones with a full-time mayor, which is most of our peer cities. The council members all have a legislative assistant that works for the council member. In Charlotte, we have people that support us, but they work for the manager. They don't work for us. And the district reps have asked for this more because then they've got somebody they can say, okay, I need you to go to this meeting tonight and take notes for me. Because again, some of them have 2 or 3 meetings a night. And that's the biggest challenge, is just responding to everybody as a district rep. So that's another thing that you could even think about, is how do you have a line item for city council? We don't really have that right now. I'll go to national meetings where the district person council member's not even there. They've sent what they call their legislative assistant. And again, that's different in a weak mayor form of government, but it certainly would alleviate the workload.
In terms of our considering the census data, when are we expecting to have the census data?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know if Alicia's on the line or not. Usually you get something, and I'm trying to remember, 10 years ago seems like 30 years ago now. I feel like we were having this discussion in January, February, with decisions made by the council, and April or May for the 2011 election. But Alicia, do you have any recollection?
So from what I've learned is that the numbers won't be final. The census numbers won't be final until next year. Although the deadline for in-person responses is October 5th. There's another couple of rounds of counting and processing that has to happen, but the numbers, I think, won't be ready until next spring. I could be wrong, but I can check into that. So I'm not sure about the process for drawing preliminary boundaries before the numbers are final.
But just a point of clarification, we should have our recommendations in before we get those numbers, right? So that once those numbers are in place, they have our guidance.
Yeah.
But the mayor and once, and she was hoping we would wrap this up months too, but things change. But so one thing, Patrick, can we get that maybe projections that Alicia mentioned the planning department would have? They must have some idea of what
Yes, we do have that. I sent Lauren the growth factors report, and she'll be sending it out to the group that shows growth projections for the next 20 years. And then what I can do is get someone on our team to break that down into our existing council districts so you can see where that might happen. But again, those numbers would purely be just projections based on past growth trends and where we might make, major transportation investments and that type of thing. But it'll be an educated guess as to where that growth might occur. So that'll give you some idea of how you could move forward and form the decision.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, committee, we're running out of time, but this has been helpful, and this is a big subject we need to tackle. I guess what we need to be thinking about is the current 11-member council with a mayor. Is that good? Do we agree that it's a good thing? And it sounds like it would be if we add another council person, it would create a little more of a challenge. So working with the 11-member board to be thinking about how would we change that up to, again, make it better for the citizens of Charlotte and the council people. So I don't know if anybody has a thought on that before we leave, but if you're feeling really strongly about that or not. Anyone want to say anything?
I think Peter made a point earlier, and Peter, correct me if I state this wrong, but maybe adding another district seat to that, not eliminating the LR seat. I'll support that, but I also want to talk about my proposal. What I would personally like to see is maybe reducing the LR seat, making one of those LR seats a district seat, and then just even it out like that, or maybe reducing it to a district seat and then adding an additional district seat based on what the data shows us. So those would be 2 or 3 points of that conversation.
That's what I'm looking at is I'm leaning towards, if we can have more discussion if we need to, adding a district seat near in the Steel Creek area, and then reducing the at-large down to 3. That would give us the 11.
Are there any projections about our growth rate? Do they expect it to continue the way it is presently? I was reading an article about rental costs dropping. And if rental costs are dropping, it could be because there's more competition for renters. Would this indicate that our growth rate is slowing and we wouldn't have to consider so much the same increase, for instance, in 2030 that we're looking at in 2020?
There's nothing to indicate that we are slowing down. There's an average of 40 people that move to Charlotte a day. And that has been consistent from census to census. And so based on a number of different factors, not just, job creation and availability of housing, but transportation and just natural migration and those types of factors say that we will continue on this pattern. Just kind of anecdotally, since COVID-19, the assumption could be made that our development has slowed down in Charlotte, and that has not happened. We're still building, businesses are still opening, folks are still moving to Charlotte. And so the things that attract people to our city are continuing to grow and get better. And so there's very little to say that trend will change. I mean, I don't have, a crystal ball, but, just the numbers are telling us that the growth projections are, we're still on an upward trajectory for population growth.
Julie, can I clarify one thing that you said earlier about the possible shift in culture? I have my intention is not at all to completely upend things. But I just want to clarify, when you said there'd be a cultural difference, is that if the mayor was only voting to break ties, or would that be
it's a regular voter? Yeah.
Yeah, if the mayor, so if it's 8 district, 4 at large, the mayor would only vote to break ties, or if it was 9 district, 4 at large, the mayor wouldn't be a voting member. Is that right?
I think correct. And I think not having the mayor a voting member is the culture right now, because otherwise, if she was only going to, she either votes or she doesn't vote. You know what I mean? So if the mayor is the 12th person voting, they're always going to be in the mix when you're trying to figure out where your votes are coming from. And okay. I think, as Patrick said, that just makes a little awkward, because, right now the mayor is the one that chooses committees. The mayor has a lot of power that, doesn't come with a vote. And I think it's good for the body to have to talk to each other and come to consensus and build a majority vote, find out where their votes are from.
That makes
versus
sense.
bringing the mayor in.
That makes sense. So again, just throwing this out there for discussion then, is there a downside to going from 7 to 9? If I was doing the math correctly, right, the 2018-2019 census estimates show that we're at almost 886,000 residents. If we go, if you divide that by 7, that's 126,000 residents per district. If you get to 9, now you're at less than 99,000. It's a pretty significant drop. And you would still have the same culture, right, where the mayor doesn't vote, and you'd have the odd number of council members, so they have to work together.
Right.
Is there a downside to that I'm not considering?
What would you do? Go to 2 at large?
Well, or you could go to 9 district, right, and keep the 4 at large.
No, that puts you above. You have to stay at 12 or less on council members.
Okay, sorry. I thought okay.
Sure, there's something I haven't thought of as to why maybe 3 versus 4 or 2 count, at large. I don't really know. I mean,
okay. Well, I think what I believe I'm hearing from you and Julie and Patrick is that the 11-member council is kind of something we need to work with, if we can. Am I hearing you correctly?
I mean, I sort of want to stay out of the politics of it. From a legal perspective, it's I don't know that it matters, but there are, it is a bit of a culture change. But I mean, the community is growing, so maybe that's an argument for keeping the population of the district representation a little lower. And you can do that a couple of ways. You can take away an at-large and convert that into a district, or you can add a district to it. But the issue of the mayor voting, not voting, I think is, I mean, I can just see, again, when you've got, and we don't have a lot of 6-5 votes, but when you do, it's usually on a pretty high-profile matter. And with the mayor, on now a 6-6 vote, and the mayor then being turned to, and okay, we're split, and you need to break it. I think that would be a potential culture change, because she's now stuck in making a decision on the controversial matters that split the board.
As I have to drop off, I apologize, but and again, the other idea is if it's just too much work for each district member, then maybe you're giving council the advice that they should be, thinking about their budget and giving council members, especially, more help. So that's one of the things too. It's just because it's a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, a lot of community meetings, and I'll leave it at that. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, we're at our time. I think this has been great for education. And we have some central questions that we can be thinking about. I know we like to vote on stuff, but I think we need to get educated on this, and also look at the projections that Lauren or Wendy sent to Lauren, and Lauren's going to send to us to give us some sense of what's going to be happening 10 years down the road. But I think next, if everyone can do some homework and really think about this and think about the central questions, and then come back at our next meeting, we hopefully can straw vote on those, and get a good summary of the survey as well. And then we can tie things up pretty soon after that. Does anybody have any closing thoughts, questions, comments? Nope. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
A good opening discussion about this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.